Hello, dear listeners. A couple quick pre-show notes. First off, this is set after Owl House, so please make sure that you listen to the Owl House episode, or at least to the D's Journal first, just to have context for what's going on here, and so you don't get spoilers if you want to go back and listen to Owl House later. Also, while I was working on this, I became aware of a certain subtext to this particular warlock-patron relationship that I hadn't noticed before. Nothing sexual, nothing like that. But it might be troubling for some people, so please go and check the content warnings if that concerns you at all. Enjoy! Dear Binx, I had barely been in Dunbrock for a few hours when I opened my journal and saw a summons to Darkon. When Yensid had said that we would talk soon enough, I had assumed that he'd meant in writing, and that soon enough would be far enough in the future that I could draw breath to speak without my ribcage complaining. Well, spending a day or two in Darkon while I recuperated made sense anyway. I could hardly explore Dunbrock to the best of my abilities when I was fairly certain that my skull was still fractured. Why did I not think of that before traveling to Dunbrock in the first place? I resupply in Darkon with some regularity, after all, for fairly obvious reasons. Of course, I had no desire to recover at home while in my current state. Max would react with absolute panic, and I was fairly certain I would be arrested for vandalism whenever I had a moment alone with Philip Whittabane's statue. But why haven't I been to Darkon since... What was I saying? Oh, yes. Jensen's last correspondence with me had begun with something that, for him, was positively warm and expansive, but he had started slipping into one of his moods toward the end of it. I doubted he would appreciate any delay on my part. Rest would have to wait. I gathered my things again and entered the mists. Irritating as this was, there would be some benefit in talking to him in person. I had several questions for him, and also... Perhaps it sounds silly, but I was taken aback by his implication that I agreed with Belos's assessment of his character. You know how much I have struggled since my acknowledgement of his true identity, but not to that extent. I had thought we were beyond that level of animosity by now. I wanted to clarify that point. It would hopefully improve his temper, at least. So, despite the fact that both my body and my spirit were in a sorry state, I entered the mists for the second time that day. And almost as soon as I emerged in a foggy glade in Darkon's Mistlands, I found a horde of shambling undead advancing toward me. They were in various stages of decomposition, from a youth who would have looked alive if not for the gaping wound in his belly, to something that might once have been an elderly Caliban before most of the flesh rotted from her bones. There was something deeply, horribly wrong about their movements, and it took me a moment to realize that they were not roaming about aimlessly as one might expect. They were moving in perfect synchronization. Before I could react, the mouth of every zombie opened simultaneously, their rancid breath mingling with the foul stench of decay. God, it smelled so much decay today.
Greetings, little scholar,
their scratching voices said.
We are the voice of Azalin Rex. Come, we have much to discuss.
I couldn't help flinching. I envisioned a conversation with the man who had introduced himself to me as Yensid, not this. Sometimes I can almost forget what you are.
A privilege I bestow on rare few. Most do not hold that knowledge for long.
I shook my head, trying to act nonchalant instead of terrified. This is new. To what do I owe the pleasure?
Your last correspondence indicated desire to make an addendum to our pact. Increased protection for your family, was it not?
Oh, hells. I was not in any sort of state to negotiate. Was Yensid... Azalin, who was not going to let me forget today that he was Azalin. Was Azalin putting on all of these theatrics deliberately as a means of intimidating me? If he was, it was working. Yes, Well, not necessarily increased, but extended. Our current pact assumes that when my service is complete, I'll be alive to protect my family myself. My hand rose instinctively to touch the part of my skull that had shattered. It never occurred to me that I might die while preparing these reports for you, and if I do, I can hardly protect my family. I gave the zombies a pointed look. There was an obvious response when one's patron was a necromancer. Barring means I have no desire to explore, at least. I cannot continue on those terms, not as I have anyway. I've taken tremendous risks for you, Yensid. Gods, I let myself be tortured rather than give up your name. And if I know that at the end of all that my family will be safe regardless of what happens to me, that can continue. But if there's the slightest chance that my death will leave them alone and unprotected... I paused. I would hesitate even to write this. Was I really going to say it to his face? But we would get nowhere if I refused to be honest. And, frankly, I wasn't going to let him frighten me into deference. I'd die for them. You know that. But I won't die for you.
Immortality does not necessarily equate to one death, little servant.
Each rotting corpse turned to me, each set of eyes burning like the last dwindling embers of a cooling hearth.
And necromancers are skilled, extending mortal lifespans. But if you will not die for me, I suspect you will not live for me either. It is within my ability to ensure the protection of your family for generations to come. Do you believe yourself deserving of such a boon for accomplishing what I expect from any loyal retainer?
I stiffened, anger burning away my fear. Any loyal retainer? I unbuttoned my bodice and opened the front of my dress. Modesty be damned, and I doubted that the sight held any interest for him anyway. My ribs were still mottled with bruises, although the healing potion had ensured that they were no longer broken, but that wasn't what I was showing him. I was showing him the sigils that had been scarred into my flesh, girdling my ribcage and stomach. The zombies leaned forward as one, inspecting the injuries with a sort of professional curiosity. I probably would have been unsettled by the clear intelligence in their undead faces, but I was too angry. This is how Ebony Maw forced me to assume my form of dread. He could have used my back as his canvas. He used my front because the skin there is more sensitive. Take a good look at these. Some of them are intricate, a lot of time, a lot of cuts. He told me that when he activated them, the pain of the knife would seem trivial in comparison, and it did. And all I had to do to get him to stop was to tell him your name. My fingers fumbled the buttons as I closed my dress again. My hands were shaking. Everything that came after that was worse, but I doubt there was anything I could have done to stop it. This was in my power to stop, and I didn't. For you, for your secrets. You have a high bar for your retainers.
I expect much, as the rewards I offer are great, and my servants know this. Even the celebrated General Alpha rose from the dead, of his own free will, so he may continue to serve me to this day. That is true loyalty. And though you have suffered, what you speak of is self-preservation. Certainly you must have realized the Titan's Maw would have disposed of you as soon as you caved. For what use would we have for a weak-willed, helpless child?
My breath caught in my throat. I felt as though he had slapped me. He had told me at the time that he found my loyalty and courage invaluable, and... If I can't be honest with you, Binx, when can I? Especially when, for all I know, I'm only writing to myself. That had meant the world to me. The pain, the helplessness, the humiliation. Knowing it had mattered. And now, to hear him say that it meant nothing? I could not help but think of Bellows, flattering me until the very moment I dared to question him.
But I am not here to argue with you as much as you enjoy vexing me. You wish an additional boon, or are you willing to grant me in return.
I gritted my teeth against the first several responses that came to mind. Not quitting right now, not ripping your arm off and beating you with it, and forced myself to take a few calming breaths. I no longer needed them, but they helped. Well, greater personal loyalty, for one thing. As I mentioned before, I don't know if I can continue as I have this far without knowing that my family will be safe regardless of what happens to me. If I'm their only source of protection, I'll balk at risks that would threaten my life or well-being. Sneaking about on tall buildings that a gargoyle might throw me from. Breaking into the offices of sadistic prison wardens. That sort of thing. I won't be able to work for you as effectively. That isn't a threat or an ultimatum. It's a simple fact and you know it. If I know that you will protect them, then serving you to the best of my ability and keeping my family safe will be the same thing no matter what happens to me. It benefits us both. It was difficult to read their rotting faces, but the zombies looked thoroughly unimpressed, and I sighed. That said, I have the feeling that you're going to sneer something at me about, I don't know, how I'm asking for extra favors in exchange for offering the same level of service as I always have, as the only thing that has changed is my sudden onset of nerves. Fine. But after 3 years, I still have very little idea of what you want, which means I also have little idea of what to offer you. So, I straightened, steeling myself. What would you ask of me? The zombies became as still and silent as the grave for a long moment, as if they were thinking, or perhaps cut off from the puppeteer.
I do not ask for much.
One sole, raspy voice finally replied.
All I require is a promise. Promise that you and yours shall never act against me, and your family shall have my protection for generations to come. Shall this promise be broken? Well, I will leave that to your rather vivid imagination.
I stared at them, stunned, as that vivid imagination offered up a cornucopia of pictures, foremost among them being a future conversation with Azalin as he spoke through whatever was left of my family's corpses after he'd finished with them. My mouth worked silently for a moment, and then I let out an incredulous laugh. Do you really think I'm as craven as that? I just told you I have very little idea of what you want. For all I know, you plan to kill as many people as Thanos and Bellows combined. Do you expect me to stand back and watch the world burn so long as me and mine are safe and you hold the tinderbox? I thought you knew me better than that.
Calm yourself, Mr. Nee.
The zombies rasped in a rather bored tone.
As I stated before, you would not find my desires so repugnant if you knew them. I believe you would understand them. Perhaps even desire the same, if our positions were reversed.
That single zombie who had spoken before, the one closest to me, a man who had either died being torn apart by wild beasts or else had not been well protected from scavengers after death, held up a hand as Azalin continued to speak through it.
No. Before you ask, I will not relay this information to you. It is not safe for either of us. Nor would I trust it to someone whose loyalty only goes so far.
Fine. I'm not here to talk about your precious secrets and plans. I'm here to talk about our pact. You're offering me more than I want, and because of that, you're asking for more than I'm willing to give. I don't need my family protected for generations. I need them protected for... I thought for a moment. I probably should have asked for more than I wanted, giving myself room to negotiate, but at this point I just wanted to leave this damn conversation as quickly as possible. The rest of my service, or if I am killed or debilitated in that service, for 5 years thereafter. By then, Poppy will be an adult by anyone's reckoning, and she can arrange her own protection even without me there. You compensate the families of soldiers who die in your armies, do you not? This hardly seems different. And in exchange... I paused again, trying to settle on a phrasing that we could possibly agree on. In exchange, during that time, I will not act against you save in defense of those who have offered you no insult.
5 years of protection after you die.
There was another long pause before he spoke again.
Nothing more than an eye blink. Pity. I thought you were more imaginative than that. No matter. I shall see it done as long as you uphold your end of the bargain. Though if you ever reconsider the time frame, visit the Waldron farm and witness what centuries of my protection can offer.
And invite you to be equally imaginative in the price you demand. No thank you. Far safer to ask a simple favor and agree not to bite the hand that feeds unless provoked. I shudder to think what those farmers must have given you.
Friendship.
The zombie's tone startled me. It was sorrowful. Genuinely sorrowful. I could barely process that, much less respond, before it became caustic.
Of course. All my methods and motivations must be malicious and repugnant. How could one such as I merely wish to protect their friends? I grow tired of your assumptions and will not speak of this further.
I felt a hot, sick twist of shame. One of the reasons I had come here was to tell him that he was wrong about me, that I did not see him as the fiend that Bellows had described. And now, here I was treating him as though he were. At his worst, such as right now, he was a hateful, vindictive, arrogant bastard to me, and I was fairly certain he liked me. But he was more than his worst. There was a reason his praise had meant so much to me. Sometimes I thought of him as my friend. Or, at the very least, like my cantankerous grandfather, inspiring equal parts exasperation and affection. The horde of zombies had begun to turn away, as well they might, for the bargain was over and there was no need for us to snipe at one another any longer. Before they could leave, I spoke. I'm sorry, Ensid. You're right, that was cruel of me to say. I should not have assumed the worst of you. They paused. They did not dignify me by turning back around, but their heads tilted slightly. And as they did, I was struck once again with that hideous mental image. Not a few dozen strangers harvested from Darkon's cemeteries, but Max and Allison and Poppy and my mother, tortured to death and forced to serve him afterwards to punish me for setting off one of his tantrums. No, I had to remember. Cantankerous grandfathers did not command armies of corpses. He may have been gray, but gray was not white. And then I began to have an idea. There was something else I wanted from him, even more than I wanted assurances for my family's safety after my death, and I had the feeling that it was a far greater risk. He was treating my current request as though it were some tremendous favor, but he must have known it was entirely reasonable. This, though, he might interpret it as a plea for amnesty for treason that I had not yet committed. And if I felt the need to make that plea, did it not follow that I intended treason? But I had a sense now of what he wanted. He kept circling back to my perceived lack of loyalty. I won't die for you. I had hardly expected those words to please him, but neither had I anticipated that they would offend him as deeply as they clearly had. Azalin, it seemed, had something in common with Jareth. He coveted my submission. For whatever reason, the man who had once told me that he had no need for me to like or trust him now sought not only duty, but devotion. Not a coin I wanted to trade in, but a coin he clearly desired. And for this, I imagined how he would react if he discovered that I had withheld information from him, or, God's help me, that I'd made a private alliance with Nebula, and repressed a shudder. Yes. I would show him my throat if it meant that he would even consider granting me this. I took a deep breath. It's been a trying day, and my temper is thin. Please, let me say something. They turned fully toward me now, still looking irritated. I chose my words with care. You were aggrieved that I am unwilling to sacrifice myself for you. You refuse to tell me what purpose I am serving, and, although this irks me, I understand that there are innocent explanations for it. I hope I have proven by now that I would not willingly divulge your secrets, but The sanctity of my mind has been violated more than once. I cannot willingly die for a cause that I am not permitted to know, nor can I feel any particular zeal to see that cause realized. I'm not your subject. I'm not willing to sacrifice myself out of some nationalistic fervor for Darkon. That means that any such sacrifice would have to be out of a sense of personal devotion to you. Out of, well, love. I waved a dismissive hand. You know what sort I mean. We're neither of us children. This is not as ludicrous a concept as it would have been 3 years ago. I like you, Yansid. Usually. You said once that it doesn't matter to you, but it matters to me. I didn't... What Belos said about the both of us... You misunderstood me. I don't believe Belos' words were nonsense because there's such a very great contrast between the two of us. I believe they were nonsense because they were nonsense. I doubt you choose any of your retainers through some filth-based metric. And what I said to him in return... I smiled ruefully as I touched the back of my head again. Painful, but since I had survived, entirely worth it. I think that hurt him more than the Eldritch Blast did, and that was my goal. It wasn't about you. I took another deep breath. I could feel my voice beginning to shake, and I tried to play it as the vulnerability of honesty rather than showing it as terror. So far, I had been swimming in relatively safe waters. Now I was venturing into the depths. But I can't serve you out of love if you hold a sword over my family's head. Part of me will always hate you, resent you, because every time you have one of your, well, fits of pique, I'll wonder whether you intend to turn it on them. And before you call that ridiculous, I spoke to you with candor today, rather than attempting to curry favor with flattery and empty promises, and you responded with pettishness. You praised me for my invaluable courage and loyalty 3 months ago, but when I asked for recompense for that courage and loyalty today, you called it base self-preservation. And every time you do something like that, I find myself wondering whether you will someday claim offense and visit your ire not only upon me, but upon them. So long as I have that fear, I cannot give myself to you in full. I hesitated, wondering if this particular bit of self-abasement would be laying it on a bit thick. I doubted I could lay it on thick where Azalin's self-regard was concerned, but if he suspected that I was approaching him with anything less than absolute sincerity, I might find myself leaving this meeting as part of that zombie horde. Sincerity, then. I reminded myself of how badly I wanted this. I reminded myself that, like it or not, I was a supplicant. I reminded myself that I did like Azalin more often than not. And then, when I felt that I could do it without a trace of guile, I did something that I had never done before for Azalin or anyone else. I dropped to one knee. Promise me that any reprisals for my words or actions will be visited on me and me alone. Please. Promise me that, and so long as you do not ask me to act against my principles, I'm yours.
Love.
The words sighed from a multitude of decaying lips. He did not speak again for a long while. I kept my head bowed for as long as I could, more to keep him from reading any dissembly in my face than anything else. As the silence stretched on, I fought harder and harder against the terror that was rising in me, the absolute certainty that he was going to strike me dead on the spot. Finally, I risked a glance upward. The zombies gazed at nothing, but their expressions were contemplative, almost wistful.
Very well, Danielle.
Only one zombie spoke, that ravaged one closest to me.
I promise to protect your family as if they were my own, for as long as you serve my person. You may rise, little scholar.
His voice took on a fondness that I had heard before, but never from him. He sounded like a father. A proud father addressing a favorite child.
though I do appreciate the gesture. Such subjugation does not suit you.
I sagged with relief, the fear that had been locking me in place rushing out all at once. It took me a moment to stand. It was all I could do not to fall over. I didn't try to hide how overcome I was. Let him read it as simple gratitude. Finally, after dabbing away some tears that would have embarrassed me if I had any room left for embarrassment, I managed to find my feet. And I laughed a little, trying to make it sound as though we were sharing a joke. He'd left himself an easy exit from his promise, since I wasn't going to allow it to remain open, but I had to keep his good mood intact. Please, this is just a general mistrust for loopholes, not a reflection on you. And should you feel the need to dismiss me, you will not hold any of my offenses against them? The lone zombie nodded.
Their offenses shall be their own, as shall yours.
He made an odd, rasping, grunting sound, and it took me a moment to realize that he was laughing. He was actually laughing without any trace of malice or mockery.
I do believe I no longer need to pay you, considering what you have sworn. Never make a deal with one of the Fae, my dear servant. But do not fret. I promise not to take advantage of your wording.
I was so taken aback that it took me a moment to laugh along, but I did. Part of me immediately started combing over every possible loophole that might remain, but no. The most important thing by far was to keep him believing that I would let him rule me, and extended litigation would kill that quickly. Thank you. I suppose... I looked straight into the eyes of the zombie who had been speaking, and although I was still smiling, my tone was serious. I suppose I shall have to trust you then.
There have been many stories of my person. Some may even contain the truth. But know this, little scholar, I have never once broken my word. Trust in that.
There was more that I had wanted to ask him when I first received his summons. Why he had chosen me, for one, and whether the necrotic energy would lead to any other changes. But I doubted that I could hold myself together long enough for an extended conversation. I believe he may have said something else, but by that point he could have imparted the hidden secrets of the universe, and I would scarcely have registered them. The horde of zombies turned to leave, and then, as one, dropped bonelessly to the ground, leaving me standing in a field of rapidly decaying corpses. As they did, I felt a rush of warmth flowing through me. It reminded me of when Death Ward had triggered, but that had brought with it a symphony of pain as all my injuries had reasserted themselves, whereas this was soothing, like sinking into a warm bath. In fact, I realized the pain was entirely gone. The back of my head no longer twinged, and when I drew a deep, experimental breath, my ribcage expanded to hold it without complaint. I touched the fabric of my bodice and could still feel the raised flesh of scar tissue through it. That would have been too much to ask for, I suppose, but there was no tenderness, and I was certain that the bruises were gone. Azalin had healed me. He had healed me with the energy that he used to animate the zombies. And as I looked at a particularly small body that could have belonged either to a halfling or a child, the body withered into ashes before my eyes. My rejuvenation had come from her, from the last vestiges of her being, and I wondered if the Sanderson sisters had felt that rush of warmth. I dropped to my knees again, this time to be enthusiastically sick. For all my plans to recuperate in Darkon, I returned to Dunbrock immediately. I could not shake the feeling that if I wrote this letter in Darkon, I would find myself spied upon by the corpses of dead beetles or something, and they would report on me, and, well. What is this going to mean for the future? I don't know. I don't know how long the goodwill I purchased will last. If I'm very, very clever, I may be able to leverage it further, but that is a dangerous game, and not one I will play without dire need. I don't know if and how Azalin will expect my service to change now that I've declared myself his creature, but it doesn't matter. I would do it again. I didn't promise to do anything, did I? I only promised to love him, which is not so far from the truth, and I told him that I would not betray my principles. The deal that I made to protect my family will not be the very thing that kills them. They will not die because of me. Nothing else matters. Nothing. Not even having to kneel and plead and offer him mastery over me. And this means I can keep operating as I have without fear. I can hide information about objects such as the doll or the heart of Atlantis. I can correspond with Nebula, perhaps find other allies. If he catches me, then I will be the only one to suffer. I know it may seem from the outside as if I have sworn myself into greater bondage, but I've bought myself a level of freedom as long as I'm clear-eyed about the consequences. I have. Binx? Please? Tell me I did the right thing. Love. D. This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Azalin Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at Darklord Azalin. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, you can find us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.